What is up, my Lorcana Goons, and welcome back to the Lorcana Goons channel. My name is Kevin, and we're here with Jack Stone for the Monday weekly Meta Watch video, where we go over Lorcana tournament deck lists, meta trends, and what you should be expecting this week as we enter the Whispers in the Well format. We're going to go over 25 plus cards that we think are going to be meta impactful and overall pretty good. So you got to look out for these cards when you're opening these packs this week, right, Jack Stone?
You 100%. And my Lorcana Goons, yes, Whispers in the Well is going to be pre-released this Friday, November 7th. We just picked the ones that we thought were going to be the most meta-defining.
Starting off with Finnick and Tiny Terror, this is a 1-cost Emerald character with 1 strength, 2 willpower that says, when you play this character, you can pay 2 more ink to return a chosen opposing character with 2 strength or less down to the player's hand. Now, immediately the cards that I think about when using this ability are going to be Tiana, Genie, Elsa even, some high-cost characters that you can remove from the board simply with a 1-cost character. Now, you do got to pay a total of 3 ink, so you're probably not going to use this on turns 1 and 2, but it still feels like a pretty powerful card. That's a lot of value you're getting from a 1-cost character, especially in a color like Emerald that doesn't have too much removal already embedded in it. Most of the removal is going to be like your welcome, which also gives your opponent some advantage, but this is an inkable removal in my opinion.
Yeah, we're seeing these 1-drops with the ability to pay additional ink and get an additional ability on top of it. We see the Clarabelle have that with the Clumsy Guest, and now Finnick, the Tiny Terror. This is a card that also reminds me of an Infinity card. I think those that do remember Cloud Kicker, the tough guy, that was a 3-cost 2. I'm sure those of you that do remember this card, Cloud Kicker. This is a 3-cost 2/2 that does have the same ability, except you're not paying any of this ink, right? However, the 1-cost Finnick plus the 2 ink you pay is 3, and it does just kind of fit that same slot if you are going to use its ability. Kevin did mention the ability to return opposing Tianas, but you could also, get rid of some other pesky characters, you know what I mean? Some bodyguard characters, and be able to get rid of some of the other characters that they're trying to protecting. So this is a very interesting card. It doesn't allow you to return your own characters, however, so you can't replay your stuff like Doc. But I'm sure if you're able to use your Finnick over and over again, it can be quite bothersome for the opponent.
Yeah, being a 1-cost character is pretty flexible too. Like you mentioned, you could just play them on turn 1 in case you want to do that. But let's go ahead and move on to another Emerald card. This one's seeing a lot of hype right now. This is Malicious, Mean, and Scary, an action song that's 3-cost, inkable, has an ability that says, put 1 damage counter on each opposing character. And this has an enchanted rare, so I'm pretty hyped for that myself because this seems extremely playable, Zack Stone. You can combo this off with a lot of your Emerald cards that already utilize the your opponent is damaged ability, or maybe even combo this off with some steel cards, because steel cards add damage, and now you have Emerald cards that can add damage. So you can maybe use Fire the Cannons plus Mean and Scary and deal 3 damage to a character, maybe even Strength of a Raging Fire. It will be able to deal some damage, and then you can finish it off with this card. It's kind of like an AoE, it deals damage to a wide spread of characters, which is really, really unique, I think. And I think my favorite part about it is that this gets around the resist mechanic, because you're not dealing damage counters, you're putting the damage counters directly on it. So it's a very interesting ruling and a very clean way to get around those pesky resist characters.
Yeah, one of the first things that I thought about was that Prince Philip, the Vanquisher of Foes. This is a character that when it does enter play, banishes all opposing characters with damage counters on it. So that means Malicious, Mean, and Scary is getting past the resist, putting damage counters on all opposing characters. And if you're able to sing it, and that is a shift 6, so on turn 6, you can basically be prepared to your opponent's board, which is really good. But then this is also a walking 6/6 quests for 3 evasive body. So I think that's very Malicious, Mean, and Scary. But honestly, Kevin, I can't hold it back anymore. The card we revealed. What if you use this in combination with it, right? Put all these damage counters onto the board and then move all of them onto one character. And that way you can just get rid of some bigger bodies. You never know how wide your opponent may go to get rid of some Tianas after your opponent has like 4 or 5 characters in play. I could see Malicious, Mean, and Scary being very influential into the way the metagame is approaching. And I think Emerald having like the only like board wipe capabilities right now, I think that's going to be something to really consider.
I also like that it is an Emerald because we have the Max Goof combination that you can use with this card where you can sing it twice potentially. So that's kind of like a grab your swords ability for all of our Infinity players. So I'm a little surprised, to be honest, because I didn't expect Emerald to be the color to have numerous board wipes in the meta. Next up, we're going to to talk about Mowgli, the man cub. This is a perfect out to an opposing malicious, mean, and scary. This is a 2-cost inkable amber card that says when you play this character, chosen opponent reveals their hand and discards a non-character of their choice. Pretty cool, especially if you've been playing the previous format. You kind of understand how bare necessities works, but this is a little bit different. Your opponent gets to choose what they discard from their hand. So I do feel like there is a little bit of different utility with this card, but overall, I love the idea of being able to look at my opponent's hand. Information is very important when trying to win the game of Lorcana, and not only do you get to snipe an opposing card depending on how it's working out, but you get to know what they're probably going to play on you the next couple turns.
Yeah, when I first saw Mowgli, the bare necessities definitely came into play, not only with the IP that he's from, but also too that like Emerald Amber discard could be a thing again. I think we all kind of remember the terror Prince John used to give us, but this card now just on turn 2 being able to rip like Sail out of the Azerite Sea if it's the only non-character card in their hand sounds really good. And as well as Amber Sapphire already having a character like Ludwig von Drake, all around expert, you are just going to be able to have a lot of hand control in the Amber class color to pair it alongside something like Emerald or Sapphire. And it is just going to be another way to play the game. But it may be something that you can time just right and get some of the key cards out of your opponent's hand. Plus, if you have additional cards that discard cards out of your opponent's hand, it's just another way to leave them with 0 cards.
The Horseman strikes, a new amber action making its way into Whispers in the Well, a 3-cost inkable card that says draw a card. Then you may banish chosen character with evasive. This card should have been printed in Fabled, to be honest, because this would have solved the Dumbo Genie Elsa issue very quickly. And it's pretty cool that they introduced this card because I do feel like a lot of people were having trouble with the current evasive meta. So now if you're playing an amber deck, you have plenty of outs to deal with the pesky evasive characters, and being able to draw a card on top of that is just broken. I feel like this card is arguably better than Brawl, which is an infinity card, and on top of that, being able to draw a card with that is just pretty crazy. There's some pretty high cost evasive characters in the metagame that I wanted to try, but with this being like in the meta landscape, I don't think you can really afford to invest too much ink into an evasive character anymore.
Yeah, one thing that I really appreciate is that they're addressing the answers that the color already lacks an answer to. So there is no evasive cards, I believe, in Amber, right? And you have something now that banishes characters with evasive in Amber. So it is a balance, and I love to see that in this game. Honestly, good job for designing this card. Even if you do not get to banish something, just cycling could be enough. I know that this card is also going to fit in a lot of like mid-range amber decks later on. There is some evasive cards to still worry about. Like you said, Genie and Dumbo were the problem last meta, but I'm going to just go ahead and throw on a whim that they're not going to really go away anytime soon. So the Horseman Strikes is definitely going to be a card I believe I'm going to want to add to my arsenal, and I do like the pretty cool epic rares, so you guys might want to go ahead and bling out this one.
And if you really want to bling out your deck, you can play this iconic rare Aerial Ethereal Voice. This is a 4-cost inkable character that I think is going to do wonders for the future of the Amber class, especially if you're playing an Amber Singer-Song deck, right? Normally, we've been kind of gravitating towards Amber Steel songs because Steels have the best songs. They have the removal songs, right? And lately, Amber Steel songs has been lacking a little bit of a draw package since Whole New World got rotated out. So I do like that we have Aerial now to kind of revisit the idea of a mid-range Amber Steel strategy. Once per turn, whenever you play a song, if there's a card under this character, you may draw a card. This character has the new boost mechanic, so once per turn, you can pay the cost right there, boost 1 ink, so that's 1 ink right there, to place a card under the character. Now you can use the ability. I've been kind of practicing this card and then some testing online, and it's not too bad. Being able to sing a Strength of a Raging Fire, draw an extra card. You don't have to pay any extra ink, which is really good. You're just kind of drawing the card after you paid the 1 to boost it. So every single time another song is used, every turn you're able to just generate extra value. So it does feel good to be able to use cards like Be Our Guest or Look at This Family in a deck like this going forward.
I do think with the additional cards that we're getting in this set as well, that we're going to have some more songs to sing and some more cards to draw. And let's be honest, must, guys. This iconic rare is just, I can't wait to see it in person, to be honest with you. And the fact that it's just a good body, a 4 cost 3/4 that quests for 2, you may not even have songs in your hand, but you're still able to progress your game state and put some pressure on the opponent. We're really going to want to emphasize 4 cost characters going into this next set.
Now we got to go over one of my favorite cards in this set, a 6 cost inkable Headless Man Horse, aka Manny. Now, I gotta say, when I first saw this card, I thought it was fake. Like, I've never seen the recent DuckTales reboot, so I saw this card and I was like, this is fan-made, isn't it? And I had to Google Headless Man Horse, and lo and behold, first thing I saw was the clip from the new series, and it's actually hilarious. But this card, actually pretty good, man. It's a 5 strength, 10 willpower character that can quest for 1. Love the flavor text. Manny was looking to get ahead, but he never considered that something in the Inkwell Caverns was looking for him. Very creepy, you know. We have some foreshadowing here too. The vines in the background of the card art. I think this card's pretty good though overall. I'm not sure what strategy this will fit in because 6 cost is really high, and normally I'm thinking you want to ramp into that, right? But maybe you're playing a Ruby Amber type deck where you're using Lanterns and Gastons to cheat out some extra ink, or maybe you're playing Sapphire Amber and you can ramp into this character, or even in Infinity format, you can potentially get this off of a Mufasa, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, Kevin, this is your one. This is your one card that you get to say is good, but I will not agree with you on it. But
Really? I think this card's broken.
It's an interesting body, and I think stats are something to really consider in limited formats. I do want to talk about that just a little bit, right? Because limited formats are going to be a thing going into initial set releases. LGSs usually like to start off with starter single player deck tournaments or limited sealed draft tournaments where you are just basically playing with 6 packs from the cards you pull. And again, stats and bodies really do matter in limited formats. So this is a card that you might want to consider just keeping in the deck that you are building in a draft format like that. And outside of that, you know, in the constructed, I can see maybe getting away with it in some like, you know, interesting character mash deck, but like as a one of just to see what happens. But I'm gonna be honest, Kevin, it's not a threat because it's got 1 lore. If it's got 2 lore though, oh man, I'm scared. Yeah. I'm so scared.
I definitely understand.
That's a different clock. That's a different clock.
I do feel like the removal in this set, it boils down to like Dragonfire and like a couple other cards, right? So that's why I'm not like too worried about like the high cost on the body. That 5/10 is wild though, you know. It's so much earlier than something like a 10/10 Goofy Knight or Giant Mickey. I think that's why I'm a little more gravitated toward this card because it does feel like one of those cards, one of those like ginormous bodies, but you're playing it so much earlier. But I don't know. Maybe I'm right. Maybe Zach's wrong. Let us know in the comments down below. All right, this is a very cool card. This is a 2-cost inkable Iago, Stompin' Mad. He has 0 strength and 2 willpower, but Challenger +5. Very nice in my opinion. A very strong way to contest an aggro meta. So daisies and high willpower characters like the Prince Bodyguard, these are going to get run down by the Iago. That 0 strength does feel a little weak, you know, because when this card turns sideways, swinging into this Iago, you're not going to take any damage whatsoever. And it is going to suffer by losing out to certain cards like the Fennec that we went over earlier.
So let's just imagine we're on the draw. We're playing like Purple Steel and we're playing against like an Amber Steel aggro deck. And they have Aurora. We have a 1-drop. They go Tiana turn 2, and we have Iago. So let's really consider what Iago can do for us in this situation. Iago is a Challenger +5, meaning he's going to be able to swing for 5. And Tiana has the ability that unless I pay 3 ink, any opposing character will lose 4 strength. So if I'm on my draw and my opponent has a sideways Tiana, I can play something like Jafar, Aspiring Ruler, or Lilo, the best explorer ever, and actually get rid of that Tiana without having to pay any additional ink, right? I think I'm going to be able to remove this Tiana, and it'll just be on the board still. So this Iago can actually make some plays, I think, into early game against some aggressive matchups, but also be able to trade into some bigger bodies even in the mid game. I actually really like this card a lot, and I would expect to see it in some Amethyst decks, maybe as like a 2-of.
Another card you guys might want to play in your Amethyst decks is the Elsa Exploring the Unknown. Now, this is one of my favorite cards in this set. I'm so excited that's an epic rare as well, because you can bling out the deck, make it a little bit higher rarity. Simple effect. On play, you may draw a card, a 3-cost inkable character with 1 strength and 3 willpower, reminiscent of the Maleficent Sorceress, but with better stats in my opinion, especially when playing Amethyst, which you can usually utilize with your Shift Elsa, the Spirit of Winter. I'm really excited for this card because oftentimes when you're playing Amethyst in this current meta, you were very forced to play a character 1, 2, and 3 and hope that you had Genie or another character that can draw you a card with 4 ink, because without it, you would have like 1 or 2 cards in hand left over by the time you started your 5th turn. But with Elsa, it lets you keep a pretty big hand size while you're deciding what you need to ink. It gives you more options, which is really good too. And in the late game, you're just digging through your deck. So if you're playing a 60 card deck, you're kind of maxing out on the possibility of seeing the cards you need to see when you need to see them.
Yeah, Amethyst is getting more draw power, and let's actually go ahead and look into this card and other strategies, not just Blurple, right? Because being able to just ink a card on turn 2, additionally, and playing this without inking beforehand is really good. But like Rubiam, for example, can just play this now on turn 3 to kind of fill up his curve. I think we were all missing the 3-cost slot in that kind of deck, right?
Yeah.
And being able to just find an additional card, see more options, and have a character that can sit some damage on it so you can move some damage later on, I think is something that's really important to talk about. I can't really think of too many 3-cost songs right away that Amethyst still has, but imagine Infinity format or we get Friends on the Other Side again. This card would just be insane, and again, more draw power for Amethyst is kind of crazy. I do like this artwork, however. Like she's like enchanting a flower, and somebody we met in Milwaukee talked about a Blurple deck and naming it Bloomethyst, and that's kind of the first impression I got with the artwork like this. So I really like this card, and like Kevin said, this is going to be an additional card we're going to have to fit in a lot of Amethyst decks because it's just such a good 3-cost slot, and it's going to survive some damage. A lot of characters with the 2 strength can't take it out too cleanly, and it's going to be able to make some plays. So we'll see this going forward in the future meta.
I just realized she's also a queen, so if you go turn 1 Aurora, you can play us on turn 2. Turn 2, draw a card, that's pretty broken. Just saying. Very cool card, very excited to see where this goes.
All right, first up for the Gargoyles now, we have a Demona that you might have think the legendary would be here, but we actually think this 4-cost 4/6 is going to be an impact into this meta. I do want to kind of like keep in mind that like the Stone by Day ability is not necessarily a drawback. You are just going to be more rewarded for playing more inkable cards, right? Because if you're going to fit some high costs on inkables into your deck, you may not be able to get away with playing a lot of Gargoyle characters. But again, this is a 4-cost 4/6, but it has Challenger 2. A 6/6 when you're swinging can take out a lot of threats. And honestly, I am very happy we have Stone by Day and Warriors by Night in Lorcana. It's really exciting.
Yeah, that 6 strength can easily knock out an Iago if you somehow give this character evasive. It also puts characters like Scrooge McDuck to shame because people were playing a 4-cost uninkable 5/5, and this card just runs over it as a 4-cost inkable. Some of the Amethyst cards are pretty insane, but I do like that the Gargoyle package is kind of spread out through the color pool as well, so you don't only have to play it in Amethyst. Next up, our next iconic rare of the set, Hades Looking for a Deal. He's a 5-cost character with 3 strength and 4 willpower that says, when you play this character, you may choose an opposing character. If you do, you draw 2 cards unless your opponent puts that character to the bottom of their deck. So this card acts as both removal and draw power, which is really good. Most of the time when my opponent's using this on me, I tend to just let them draw because, Amethyst is going to draw cards anyway, so I might as well let them draw 2 again. So for being a 5-cost character with 3 strength and 4 willpower, that body is pretty good. It replaces itself and gives you an extra card most of the time, and if not, you're going to be removing a character. So choosing a card like a Maui Shark or maybe a Tamatoa, some of these big bomb characters that we're kind of expecting in this new meta is going to be really powerful when you're only paying 5 ink to kind of choose a 7-cost or higher character.
Yeah, when I read this card, most of the time I just read it as a 5-cost 3/4 that says draw 2 when it enters play, because I don't think I'm giving my opponent the option to remove my card. It would be very niche scenarios where I would allow them to banish a character that early on, and again, just Amethyst Sapphire going to be a very much a powerhouse into this meta again, has more removal and again more draw power. I'm shocked that they are getting all these cards and all these deals, right? But This is an iconic rare. Is going to be another chase to max rarity your Blurple deck. I know a lot of people are not too excited to have to spend the amount of money that they think that this card is going to settle at, but I love playable iconic rares. This is awesome for the game, and it gives a little bit more bling on top of the meta spice, right?
You know we had to mention the legendary Demona as well, the 6 cost Inkable, 5 strength, 6 willpower. This Gargoyle also quests for 2 and has the Stone by Day ability, but when you play this Demona, you get to exert all opposing characters. I've been asking for like a mass exert card for a while, and we did kind of get one with Restoring the Crown, but that was a 6 cost uninkable song, and that just felt so weak because it wasn't even on a
Action.
body, right? This is insane. This is a character that has the same ability potentially, and you get a 5/6 two lore quester. And then for whatever reason, they just decided to say, "Hey, what if you just draw 3 cards? What if you just draw extra cards when you do this ability?" So, well, I have noticed that sometimes when I'm playing against these Gargoyle or this Demona card, it is very effective for me to lower my hand size because I do get to play around the Demona because I do drop it. I'm gonna draw a bunch of cards. So you do have the risk of giving your opponent some cards, but most of the time it just doesn't matter. Like it just doesn't matter because you're literally gonna clear the opponent's board, and if they're only gonna have 3 cards in hand because they had less than that, then you're fine. Like you don't mind giving those 3 cards because you're gonna have tempo after that more than likely, right?
Yeah, something that I thought about when this card was first announced was that like we are just going to see Demona Wars. We're going to see a bunch of people try to build up their board and try to just change the game with a Demona swing, right? We might see some bodyguard characters start to see more play now, right? The having to exert all opposing characters means bodyguards are turned back on, and that's another way to answer a card like this. Once again, the Stone by Day ability does limit it. It does get to stay ready one time, but more often than not, they are not going to be able to like challenge or quest with it unless they know it can be ready in next turn. It's kind of important for Amethyst to keep its bodies on the board if we're going to continue to be playing cards like Second Star to the Right and Sing later on.
All right, let's go over another Gargoyle member. This is Hudson, the Determined Reader, a 2 cost Inkable, 2 strength, 4 willpower character. I really like that all these Gargoyle characters are just overstated. It's kind of fun. When you play this character, you get to draw and discard a card. Very steel coded. You get to use the Mulan ability of drawing and discarding. I think that's really important because you want to have inkable cards that can do that, especially when you're playing multiple copies of Doc. Maybe you're playing Desperate Plan or something, so you can discard these cards out of your hand when you don't need them. Does have the Stone by Day ability, but I think that's a very good balance for a 2 cost character with 4 willpower and 2 strength. This is going to contest a lot of characters, and that hefty willpower will let you survive a lot of swings. So if you give this character Challenger, sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah, it's crazy that the ability reads finding answers because that is what you're going to want to do with Hudson. And just the stats alone really incentivize me to just kind of just play bodies until my opponent can't do anything, right? I think a lot of people found themselves in staring contests in this format, and it just being able to just stay on the board for another turn on top of finding additional cards and getting some other cards in your hand that may not be useful, like Kevin mentioned. It's an amazing card, and there's a lot more gargoyles that fit into the steel class color. And I think that there's like 3 colors that gargoyles are compiled to, so you're not just forced into one color pair. You got options here, and I really like that. And one of the heroes himself, the Goliath, I am very impressed with the artwork. I love this card and the enchanted artwork. But the effect is something to also go over to. Dusk to Dawn at the end of each player's turn, not just yours, each player's turn. If they have more than 2 cards in their hand, they have to choose and discard until they have 2. And if they have fewer than 2 cards in their hand, well, they draw until they have 2. This is constantly checking at all points in the game. So if there's anything at the end of turn that forces opponents to like discard cards in their hand, then they're going to be able to draw. And it doesn't necessarily like trigger twice. I think if you have like two Goliaths in board, I don't think you're going to be able to like discard like your hand and then draw again, discard and draw and do something like that. But there's a lot of other combinations that this card really works with. But it's a check to a lot of these greedy Amethyst decks that want to just draw a bunch of cards and keep a large hand size. And it might be something to consider in like Emerald Steel, because if I'm going to be able to return a lot of cards to your hand with like Stop Chaos in its tracks and Mother Knows Best, it's going to force you to like empty out your hand again, or you're going to lose your cards. So this is a very interesting card. I really like where they're going and kind of like punishing these greedy draw decks. It does force players into certain play patterns.
That is pretty cool, actually. You can use your welcome on the opponent, and then if they don't end up using their hand, it's going to be whittled down to only 2 cards. This feels like also a dock ability every turn. If you're playing something like Sapphire Steel and you ink your entire hand, you play this card, you're going to draw 2 cards, and every single turn for the rest of the game, if you just keep dumping your hand, you'll just keep drawing 2 cards at the end of your turn. If you don't quest with this character, it's going to stay ready, so your opponent's going to have an out to it. Maybe you play something like Aurora and give it ward and protect it from being shot down from a Dragonfire. Really cool card, man. Goliath, the clan leader, also comes out in an enchanted rare, so I'm pretty excited to see how that's going to be looking in the metagame. Yeah, Goliath's so strong it actually gets around this new card coming out in Whispers in the Well. He hurled his Thunderbolt. This is a song, 4 cost, uninkable. It deals 4 damage to chosen character, and then your deity characters gain Challenger +2 this turn. Very interesting. Kind of reminds me of Along Came Zeus, obviously, but not 5 damage 4. So you can't just one-shot cards like those Goliath. You're going to have to still figure out a way to deal that extra damage if you want to get rid of 5 willpower characters, but this is more removal for Steel. You're no longer only relying on Strength of a Raging Fire, so I think Amethyst Steel players are pretty happy. You now have some extra follow-up. If you go turn 4 Genie, then turn 5 you can sing the He Hurled, then turn 5 you can sing Thunderbolt with that Genie or that Dumbo, or, instead of just having to rely on Strength, you just have other options, which is really, really strong. I also like it in, concept of Amber Steel mid-range. You have way more removal now in the mid-game to use with your Amber Steel decks, and maybe you want to use your Gargoyle characters to kind of control the mid-game as well when you're playing a deck like that, right?
We are getting our prayers answered for those that are praying for more removal. Maybe they've already had this planned all along. Maybe they wanted us to suffer in a removalist meta for just one format and then give us the removal we really needed in the next set. The little additional ability for your DDD characters to gain Challenger +2 only kind of would work in like a Ruby Steel or a Sapphire Steel deck that I can think of right now. I know Hades Infernal Schemer might just have the additional Challenger +2 that could be used. And again, Maui Shark, I think, is also a DDD, and it's already got 7 strength. Does it need Challenger +2? Maybe not, maybe so.
Let's move on to some Ruby cards, because Ruby has been just completely disrespected in this new meta. Nobody was playing any Ruby cards in Fable, and I'm so hyped. I'm so glad I can finally add some red cards to my purple deck, because I can once again be a Ruby Amethyst player. Maybe I'm coping, but I do like this Tinkerbell, the fancy footwork. This is a 1-cost inkable character with 3 strength and 1 willpower. This could quest for 1, but it immediately already outclasses Captain Hook Rafiki. I love this card. I'm so hyped. The power creep is insane, because we had a card like this that is uninkable, and now we just have an inkable version for absolutely no reason. And it's a Tinkerbell, so you can shift on it with your other Tinkerbell characters, which is very nice, right?
Yeah, this card's really good, right? So that means like Captain Hook and Rafiki's like couldn't quest on turn 1 because Goons characters could take it out for free. But now Tinkerbell Fancy Footwork will trade into any other 1-drop except AZ Duck, however. But again, this is just a very, very, very interesting card. We are seeing more Shift Tinkerbells come up. We still have the Giant Fairy that was reprinted in Fable. That was an OG classic from the first chapter. So Ruby Steel being able to shift now and get some extra damage early on might put it on the map. You never know, right? No, he's back. An inkable Diablo, but doesn't say evasive and draws a card when I do, right? This is a 2-cost uninkable 3/3 with 2 lore. Now, I got to admit, this is a pretty overstated character, and sorry, Bonsai, you gluttonous predator, you have been outclassed. There is now another card, and Diablo has an additional willpower to bring in on the block, and that's just better. Let's just go ahead and flat out say that that's just better. It is an ally, and it's got some interesting, what's it called, flavor text here. Be careful when gathering herbs in the inkwell caverns. You never know who's watching. So we're getting some more alluding to, the future sets. I really like what they do with the storytelling and their card design. And I could see this card definitely making a splash in some Rubiam type decks. It's a nice 2-cost body that will trade into most characters, but if it doesn't do that, it's questing for 2, and that's insane.
Obviously reminds us of Mr. Smee as well. Mr. Smee being inkable made it like just overpowered, but this kind of gives it a little bit of a balance, right? I feel like this can kind of be used in some aggro decks. At least that's how Bonsai was being used. Bonsai had the random drawback of also being a hyena, which just meant that a Rafiki was able to clear it for free, whereas Diablo does not have that drawback, right? So I can definitely see this being used in like in a mid-range or an aggro deck. But what I really like about this like recent set and this new power creep is that we're just getting better characters, right? We're getting better early game characters, which is kind of what you need in a lot of decks. Because the problem with Lorcana, I think, was that you're not really able to play high cost characters in this game unless you're playing Sapphire to ramp into them. Mainly because the early game was just very tempo based, and if your color combo did not have ways to take control of the early game, you just get blown out of the water. But now we're getting a lot of like early game vanilla characters that are overstated, and this is gonna really help us create decks that can take control of the early game until you can build up to those high cost characters. So I'm pretty excited to not have to play Sapphire to get to, a certain part of the game state, because I can play cards like Diablo instead in the early game. Another card that kind of fulfills this purpose in Lorcana is going to be the Shere Khan Keen-Eyed Hunter. This is a 2-cost inkable character with 3 strength and 3 willpower. Steel is also getting a character with the exact same stats, which is really cool. And I feel like this is just a very strong way to, give yourself control of the early game against some of these like really high tempo decks. And you're going to be able to play this character on turn 2. Now when your opponent starts to ramp with their T-pos into genies, you could potentially still, combat the opposing board with some powerful characters. 3/3 body on a 2-cost does not lose out to fire the cannons, which is very strong. Let's go over Bronx, the ferocious beast. This is a 3-cost inkable in Ruby that has 6 strength and 4 willpower with reckless. Yes, you heard that. A 3-cost with a 6/4 body. Has reckless, but this is already just as strong as like some of our 5 and 6 cost characters. Does have the Stone by Day ability, so there's the balance right there, but you just gotta play this on turn 3, and it completely stops your opponent from questing with a lot of characters, because it gets to the one-shot it, We're kind of talking about how the Iago plus a Challenger 2 boost will clear Tiana. Bronx plus Lumiere will clear Tiana just as easily, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, I can see the ability to get rid of something like on the spot or just kind of threaten your opponent from questing is going to like incentivize this card being played. It is something that can't ready. However, if you only have 3 or more cards in play, which is something to really consider, I can see this card easily being like, played around, but it is going to make your opponent make different decisions. I do believe having an edge in this game is to make your opponent's turns as awkward as possible, and a card like this can do just that. And I will kind of emphasize too with the other Tinkerbell that we have already. I think it's the Insistent Fairy, that this is a character that you can play on turn 3 and turn it
Oh
sideways and
yeah.
gain some lore. So there's some playability with this card. Just you may have to kind of see the lines ahead of time. And maybe you have the Bronx in play, and on turn 4 you decide to play this Goliath, a 4-cost 5/5. Now, if you want to turn this sideways and gain some lore, you can, right? That's how Tinkerbell works. But whenever one of your Gargoyle characters challenges another character, you can also gain an additional lore. So we can use this card in combination with Demona, the legendary, and turn everything sideways to be able to swing and just give your characters the additional ability. But let's also talk about Ruby Steel. We have more cards and gargoyles in that color combination, as well as Mushu. Cards that also let your other characters get a bunch of buffs when challenging and gain additional lore when banishing characters in challenges. So you can have a Ruby Steel gargoyle deck exist or a Ruby Amethyst gargoyle deck exist. I really like the direction you can go with the gargoyle decks. And again, this card will definitely see play. A 4-cost 5/5 is still something to really talk about because this character is also inkable. So again, Scrooge McDuck was also seen play just for more of its stats alone. But this is just another thing that I think will also define the way we build our decks. And then who knows, we might have to put World's Greatest Criminal Mind back in some Amber decks to get rid of some of these really high strength, easy to play cards.
Yeah, Goliath is also a hero character, Zach Stone, as you pointed out, so you can use this in combination with One Last Hope and give him the ability to challenge readied characters too. So I know the Ruby Steel strategy does revolve around challenging characters, and it can be kind of hard because you can't really exert them, but there are some characters that let you challenge readied characters in that color pool, and that sounds pretty cool with this Goliath ability. And yeah, I do like that you mentioned World's Greatest Criminal Mind, because all of these Gargoyle cards seem to have at least more than 5, most of them have more than 5 strength anyways. But you know who doesn't have more than 5 strength, or doesn't have a head for that matter? The Headless Horseman, Terror of Sleepy Hollow. This is a very strong card. I'm super excited for this card to land in the Lorcana meta. A character that will banish a chosen character with 2 strength or less on play. 5 cost and inkable. I feel like we needed this in like Ruby Amethyst, right? Because on turn 4 you'd play Genie, and on your opponent's turn 4 they're already playing an Elsa on you. So it feels very comfortable to be able to clap back with a 5 cost character that can immediately banish their opposing Genie or their Elsa or any other pesky evasive character or just small body character against those aggro decks as well. Also has a secondary ability. During your turn, whenever an opposing character is banished, each of your characters gets +1 strength. So on turn 5, you best bet you're going to be playing this character to be able to banish an opposing character. So that means all your other characters on board are going to get a strength boost. So if your opponent is not playing around that, you're going to be able to get some insane trades. And this is not just on curve. Like doing this later in the game too is something really powerful. It's like a force to be reckoned with, because sometimes I just be top decking the Horseman and it completely changes the pace of the game.
I would like to kind of bring up Brawl, right? The 3-cost inkable action that has the same ability, but maybe this character brawled a little too much and lost its head, but now it is back on a 4/2 body with 2 lore. So even after you develop this character and remove a threat, you can quest for 2 with it again. And let's bring up how Sapphire still has tools like Sapphire Coil to reduce the opposing character's strength. So you can take down some bigger bodies. That's right. Some 4 strength characters can go down to 2 after you ink. And if you can ink more than once a turn, then you're going to be able to take down some 6 strength characters. So Headless Horseman, I'm very excited. Again, they really gave us all the removal we were asking for in this set. I'm my hands are in the air for what they can do in Winter Spell. I'm going to be honest with you. Let us know in the comments what you think is going to come in Winter Spell.
And last color, you know we saved the best for last. We have Sapphire, starting off with the 2-cost item Ink Runner. This is the new Popsicle, I like to think of it. When you play this item, you get to draw a card. Then it has a new ability that says, exert this item, pay an ink, chosen character gains alert this turn. They can challenge characters as if they had evasive. Very strong. Zach, you made a very strong point. This set introduced a lot of answers to problematic issues that we had in the Fabled format, like being forced to play evasive characters to just out the opposing Genies and Elsas, but now Ink Runner can give you alert on any of your 3 strength characters. Very, very strong. I feel like items are back on the map. You know, you can play the Belle, Apprentice, and Venture again to being able to pop an item like this after you drew off of it, and then later on play Tamatoa, grab this item back, you play it, you draw more cards. It's not Popsicle, it's not a 1 cost, but it's an inkable 2 cost, and when you're playing Sapphire and you're ramping to like infinite ink, I don't think that makes much of a difference, to be honest.
Yeah, just being able to kind of use it as like a sneak attack way to remove an evasive threat is kind of what I'm imagining it, right? Like you may not want to play this on 2 to just draw a card, right? You may want to ramp on 2 like you're normally used to doing. But after you develop some bodies, after you get some characters in play, your opponent's gonna go, oh, I can play Dumbo, I can play Genie, I can turn these sideways. And then all of a sudden you go Ink Runner, draw, pay an ink, and make something have alert and get rid of that threat. They won't see it coming, and I promise you that's going to be the better way to use the card like this. You know, it will have that static ability to be used whenever, but if it's not already in play, your opponent doesn't know it exists, and they may have to consider it in making some different decisions just because of the card being in the card pool itself. But like you did talk about, Kevin, being able to banish it and play your bells for free and get it back with Tamatoa just puts those cards back in the Sapphire meta again. And I am excited to play with Tamatoa. I think that there's a lot of playability with that card with some other additional Sapphire cards we're getting. So let's kind of hope that it doesn't take over the meta like it did last time.
Sapphire getting plenty of cards in this set that are going to make a huge impact, I think, in the early metagame. Here we have a Cinderella Dream Come True, a 4-cost uninkable princess hero that has 2 strength and 3 willpower. Her ability lets you ink an extra card at the end of the turn if you played a princess character that turn. And then you get to draw a card, which is very important. Two things I want to note here. You get to draw a card, so you're replacing the card that you got to ink, and you get to ink any card from your hand with this ability. So you get to ink uninkable cards, which is very cool. And yes, it does count herself. So herself being played that turn counts as a princess, and going forward the rest of the game, whenever you play a princess, it's pretty good. Now, I feel like playing this on turn 3 is obviously the best play, right? You're going to get to extra ink back to back to back, but later on in the game, this card does become a little less good. So I don't know if it's a card I want to play 4 of necessarily, just because like later on in the game, it's not as fun to see off the top of your deck, but you do really want to see it. I don't know. What do you think, Zach?
I'm going to be honest with you, Kevin. I'm playing 4 because I want to see it. And again, I am just thinking about what Sapphire wants to do. On turn 2, it wants to ramp, and on turn 3, it wants to play a 4-cost character. Now, this is a 4-cost character that tells me I can ramp again. I think I'm sold. I'm not too sure if you're going to convince me otherwise. And honestly, I'm going to bring up this card you brought up in the very beginning of the video, Kevin. How would you like to play Manny on turn 4?
That sounds pretty broken. Turn 2 Tifo, turn 3 Cinderella into a turn 4 Manny. Yeah, maybe I'm sleeping on Cinderella. We gotta get that turn 4 Manny combo going. I love to see it. And then after we develop our turn 4 Manny, we can sing Might Solve a Mystery either with the Cinderella or the Manny. This is a new Sapphire song that'll let you search the top 4 cards of your deck for both a character and an item. Yes, you heard that. You get a 2-for-1 special with the Sapphire card. Now, why? I don't know. I don't know why they make cards like this. This is a broken +2. I feel like you're just able to utilize this so well with the new Sapphire items that are going to hit the board. Zach, I see you're stressing already. That's my exact reaction to. My exact reaction when I first read this card. Because this is just infinitely better than a card like Be Our Guest. And then you look at a card like Look at This Family. That's a 7 cost. That's a 7 cost song. Yeah, it sings together. But it's a 7 cost song to add 2 cards from your deck. Dig a little deeper. That's an uninkable. I think you're also adding only 2 cards. This is pretty nuts, I think. Inkable, 4 cost. I like it. I feel like, yeah, you're going to have to play items to get its full value. But with an item like Ink Runner in the meta, I'm not even mad that I got to play that in my deck.
Yeah, the ability to just find 2 cards off one sounds really good, but even if you're not finding 2, just the additional card that it can add, like the ability to add up to 1 character and 1 item, means it almost never misses. And I love that this card, it just feels that powerful, but they didn't have to make it inkable, and they didn't have to make it a song. Like it's just insanely powerful right now. And Amber Sapphire is also a color class that I think isn't really being explored, at least not in this Fabled meta. But we might be able to actually solve a mystery and build this deck, right? And there is that aerial card we talked about that is going to let you draw cards after you play and sing songs. So just getting all this value and having additional singing bodies that you can play on turn 2 to play this and sing it on turn 3. I'm kind of sold on like Sapphire just being like the best color going into the Whispers in the Well meta.
I totally agree, Zach Stone. I think that's why we saved it for last, because this color is clearly going to dominate, I think, the new metagame. Here we have Sudden Scare, a 4-cost inkable action that says put chosen opposing character into the player's inkwell face down. Then that player puts the top card of their deck into the inkwell face down. So it'll force your opponent to double ramp, right? But in the late game, when both of you have like nothing in hand and only like a couple cards on the board, this card is insane. It's a 4-cost spot removal. I can't, dude. This card is just so broken. Like I think that we're gonna have Sapphire as like the best color. It might be just best deck. You play blue deck, and that's okay. We're gonna have to bow down to the Sapphire overlords. Sudden Scare, a very strong card, man, because it just feels like an inkable Hades, an inkable Dragonfire, if you will. It's probably not something you want to use in the early game on curve, right? Like I'm not gonna go like turn 2 Tipo, turn 3 Sudden Scare. Doesn't seem necessary, but as the game progresses, when I have more bodies on board, when I have more ink to spare, I can easily play, with 8 ink, play a 4-cost character, and then Sudden Scare. And then keep doing that back to back to back, and just develop tempo while removing your tempo. And if you only have a couple cards in hand, I don't really care if you have 10 ink, 20 ink. It doesn't matter, because you only have 2 cards in hand anyways.
Yeah, I really want to kind of emphasize that like any sort of cost reduction now for actions is something that you really got to consider, because being able to just play this card and play a body on top of it is going to put you ahead. I do want to emphasize though that like using Sudden Scare is going to give your opponent the ability to just accelerate their inkwell, right? And they you could play a sudden scare on turn 4 on their 4 cost character, and now you give them the ability to play a 7 cost character on the next turn. So you have to keep in mind that you are accelerating a lot of people's game plans, and the later the game goes, or I would say the greedier their deck is, the worse is this going to be for you, because you are just allowing them to just play these bigger bodies a lot early, and it may be too much. And we're seeing a lot of consistent draw power with the amount of Amethyst and Steel cards that we've been getting. Sudden Scare just might be a one of in some of these Sapphire decks, but it is good to see that they have options for removal. And I'm going to be honest that the drawback of giving them ink might end up costing them. Who knows?
I don't know. I don't even think of it's a drawback, to be honest. I feel like this is like a 4 of, like, straight up. Just like, I don't know, man. Like, when you're simplifying the game state back to back to back, if you're playing something like Ruby Sapphire, you know, and I'm dropping Headless Horsemans and I'm like popping your cards, I'm swinging with my Gargoyles. You know, if we're top decking, if we're playing a very grindy game, this card just seems broken, you know. But, you know, only time will tell. Only time will tell how good this is. Like, granted, not a card I said that, you know, that I would like to play on turn 3 or 4, but still, it's just removal. More removal for Sapphire, and it's not the only removal, because we have one more to go over too. Here we have Spooky Sight. This is an enchanted rare that I'm really excited for. It's a 6-cost uninkable board wipe for Sapphire. It says, put all characters with 3 cost or less in their player's inkwell face down and exerted. Now, I do want to go on record and say, I think this card is a little bit overrated, but it's very important to have a card like this in the metagame, because this card alone is going to stop just ignorant aggro decks from being a thing. Now, what's really weird about this card is if you're playing an aggro deck with a lot of like low to the ground characters, but you don't have any top end, then you're going to get heavily punished by a card like Spooky Sight, because they're going to be able to put like all 4 like, you know, 3 cost or lower characters on your board into your inkwell. Yeah, you're going to have 7 ink, but you're not going to have anything to draw off of that. If you're playing Amber Steel, like, at best maybe you're going to top deck a dock and draw some extra cards, but going wide with small bodies isn't going to matter. But if you're playing something a little more mid-rangey, you know, you're playing those Ruby Am strategies we were talking about, you're questing with those 2-cost Diablos, if they use Spooky Sight on you, all of a sudden you're going to be at 6 or 7 ink, so you can start dropping your Demonas, your Gargoyles. So I do think this card can be a little bit lackluster, but it's just an important card to have in your deck and in the meta, because it is going to stop like the Daisy Duck decks, the Amber Dog Song decks from really being a thing.
Yeah, and honestly, I'd like to talk about like meta development a little bit in this part, because I personally think that the moment we start to see Sapphire decks not include this in their deck when they do believe aggro doesn't exist is when aggro comes back. I'm gonna go on record and say that like every Sapphire person should just always at least play 1 or 2 copies in this at all times. Every deck list we see needs to have that at all times, because if at any point one pops out with 0 copies, aggro will show up again. And if you don't want aggro to come back, guys, play 1 or 2 Spooky Sights at all times. It is just going to scare them away. It is not the best card into these like late mid-range and more like heavy control based matchups, right? It is just an unplayable card in those matchups, but you would just be better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it, as they say. And it's a card that I promise you, if it ever phases out, aggro will show up again, and if it goes unchecked, it is going to be a problem in the meta. And it's good that these things exist. Some people will consider their deck choice based on their card pool, but even in a longer tournament, like a DLC, you could see aggro being taken if Spooky Sight is starting to be less played, honestly, because the more often than you're gonna play into these matchups and they don't have Spooky Sight in their deck, the more often you're just gonna get free wins.
And the last card we're going to go over today, which is also our Set Champs promo for the Whispers in the Well season. Here we have Daisy Duck, the Paranormal Investigator. Now, she's a detective character, a hero character, and a Floodborn. So a lot of awesome synergy with the classification there. This means you can shift this on your 1-cost Daisy on if you have 4 ink, which you could do in Sapphire by turn 3. So turn 1 Daisy, turn 2 Tipo, turn 3 Shift Daisy. Then when you quest with this Daisy, it has an ability that says, while she's exerted, cards in the opponent's inkwell enter Exert. It is a very powerful card. Now, granted, that combo that I just mentioned, it's a 3-card combo, and it feels kind of hard to pull off, to be honest, but maybe you want to add even one jump ahead so you can guarantee yourself that turn 2 ink, so you can always ramp into this Daisy Duck Investigator. Because if you're going first, putting your opponent on only 2 to 3 ink by turn 3 and 4 while you are already at 4 and 5 ink because you've been ramping, that's just extremely unfair. Now, granted, if you're on the draw, it's probably going to be a little bit harder of an ability to pull off, but there's already not many answers to Daisy Duck on turn 1, so being able to play a 6-cost character on turn 3 still seems pretty good to me in my opinion, and you can combo this off with World's Greatest Criminal Mind or anything else that really, benefits from having support in your deck.
Yeah, like if you're gonna high roll turn 1 Daisy into turn 2 ramp into turn 3 shift Daisy, your opponent's going to be behind the whole time. Like I can only imagine them on to turn 3 only being able to play a 2-cost character and just
Oh
feeling really
man.
bad about it.
Oh man, no Genie on turn 4, no Elsa on turn 5. Oh my goodness.
I mean, just imagine the non-Sapphire decks you play. Like, imagine playing against like Purple Steel. You go 1-drop a Daisy, they play a 1. You go 2, they play a 2. You shift, and now they have to play a 2-cost character on turn 3. They cannot set up their Strength of a Raging Fire play. It is going to be a problem if you do high roll it. However, outside of that, unless you're swinging that early into the turns with the card like this, the later the game goes, I think the worse this card can get. It does have support, which allows you to give your other characters some additional strength, so that Tipo you played on turn 2 to help you accelerate it can be used to take out some other bigger threats later on. But again, you need to kind of see this card as early as possible to get the most amount of efficiency. I think if you do high roll it and you get to play it on turn 3 on the play, you will probably beat any deck you face against.
Yeah, I'm even considering playing the 2-cost Daisy Duck. That's the new Daisy Duck, the Sapphire character that has support, just so you have more shift targets. Because even, not ramping and still managing to play this by turn 4 seems pretty powerful. But just in my small testing, I have been in scenarios where I still play this on turn 6, and it does just mess up the math for the opponent to like play characters later on in the game or like certain combo pieces, right? Like right now, like we were talking about, there's a lot of ways to combo off with like Ink Runner Tamatoa, or maybe you're playing Hades with another body, and even just that 1 ink, that 1 extra ink that your opponent can't necessarily use when they ink that turn could make an impact. But I do agree, Zach, that later on in the game, this card does become a little bit more buns as you progress in the game. But it's still a 6-cost character, inkable, that can quest for 2, so it's always ink in your hand, and that's really why we think this card and a lot of the other cards that we just mentioned are going to make a huge impact on the meta going into the Whispers in the Well format, which begins this Friday, November 7th. You can find it at your local game stores, and next week you're going to be able to start seeing it at the Targets, the Walmarts, and all these big box retailers. So be sure to be prepared for the new format while you head to your local game stores. I know most game stores do like sealed events, so there's not really much constructed events going on, but there's already going to be big tournaments happening on these few opening weekends of Whispers format, right? So we're going to cover those, so you be sure to stay tuned to Lorcana Goons for more. Like, comment, and subscribe so you can keep up with all of our Meta Mondays and Market Watch Fridays content and everything else in between, right, Zach Stone?
Yes, and thank you to all the Lorcana Goons that are still with us at the end of the video. Again, like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure to join the Discord if you're not already in there. Talk about some of these spicy brews that I know a lot of people are going to be coming up with the new meta. But until then, stay tuned to Lorcana Goons. We'll see you Goons next time.